On a quiet June morning in 1912, a local merchant pushed open the door of a silent house, stepping into a nightmare that local police were entirely unequipped to handle. Law enforcement in the early 20th century was remarkably primitive. There were no crime scene tapes or specialized response teams. In rural communities, a sheriff was often just a respected citizen relying on common sense rather than science. This era operated under a system where early forensics barely existed outside major cities. Concepts like blood typing or trace evidence collection were unheard of in farming towns. The primary method of investigation involved gathering witness statements and looking for visible clues. The system relied on community gossip, assuming any disruption would be noticed. There was no framework for handling a stealthy intruder who left no obvious trail. Because of these limitations, the immediate response to a major crime was often chaotic. When the local marshal arrived, standard procedure did not involve securing the area. Instead, word spread rapidly, and the house was treated like a public spectacle. Dozens of curious onlookers were allowed to walk through the property, peering into rooms and shifting objects without restriction. The physical handling of the environment compromised any chance of a clean investigation. Townspeople picked up items, stepped in blood, and moved furniture before photographs could be taken. Cross-contamination was an entirely foreign concept to authorities managing the crowd. By the time regional investigators arrived, the original state of the house had been thoroughly erased by curious hands and muddy boots. The immediate consequence of this compromised scene rippled outward, blinding investigators across Iowa. Because the physical evidence was hopelessly trampled, authorities lost their best chance to track the perpetrator's escape route. Valuable footprints in the dirt outside were obscured by the gathering crowd. The killer easily slipped away, vanishing into the vast Midwestern plains without leaving a usable physical trail. This loss of evidence severely handicapped the state's ability to coordinate a search. Without clear suspect descriptions, law enforcement agencies were forced to chase rumors instead of facts. They detained countless drifters based purely on suspicion. The failure to secure the initial site meant every subsequent lead was built on a fragile foundation, making a definitive conviction nearly impossible. As news of the brutal crime spread, a profound wave of terror washed over the state. The realization that extreme violence could occur in a quiet community shattered the illusion of rural safety. Families who had never locked their doors suddenly found themselves barricading their homes. Hardware stores completely sold out of locks and ammunition within days. This paralyzing fear quickly bred deep paranoia among neighbors. Trust evaporated as people began to view familiar faces with intense suspicion. Whispers and accusations tore through communities, pitting prominent businessmen against local laborers. The shared trauma left a permanent scar on the collective psyche of the region. People no longer felt safe, haunted by the thought of a stranger in the dark. The epicenter of this widespread panic was a bustling community named Villisca. Before that fateful morning, the town was known primarily as a prosperous hub of agriculture. It sat along a major railroad line, bringing a steady stream of commerce and travelers. The town represented the ideal of Midwestern progress, defined by its successful storefronts and closely knit neighborhoods. In a matter of hours, Villisca transformed from a beacon of prosperity into a place defined by tragedy. The railroad, once a symbol of growth, suddenly became a source of dread. It provided a perfect, untraceable escape route for anyone looking to disappear. The very infrastructure that built the town's success now cast a long, threatening shadow over its residents. The physical layout of Villisca played a crucial role in how events unfolded. Dirt roads connected neatly arranged wooden houses, creating a dense grid where everyone lived in close proximity. The streets were quiet at night, illuminated only by sparse lamps that left deep pockets of shadow. Endless fields of tall corn surrounded the town, isolating the community. At the edge of a quiet street sat a modest, two-story White House with a welcoming porch. It looked exactly like every other well-kept home, surrounded by a small yard and a sturdy barn. Large windows faced the street to catch the summer breeze. Yet this ordinary exterior starkly contrasted with the unimaginable horror behind its closed doors. Inside that house, the execution of the murders revealed a terrifyingly methodical system. This was not a crime of sudden passion, but a highly calculated operation. The perpetrator waited until the deep hours of the night, ensuring every occupant was completely asleep. They did not bring a weapon, instead choosing to use a heavy axe found in the backyard. The killer's system involved strange, deliberate rituals that went beyond the act of violence. After the attacks, they took the time to drape clothing over the faces of the victims. They moved methodically through the house, covering every mirror with cloth. Finally, they locked all the doors from the inside and left the keys behind, creating a sealed tomb. Reconstructing the perpetrator's movements required examining the gruesome procedural details left in their wake. Blood spatter patterns on the ceilings indicated exactly where the attacker stood. The height of the gouge marks in the plaster suggested a swinging motion requiring significant physical clearance. Investigators noted the killer moved from room to room with complete, silent familiarity of the floor plan. Physical items abandoned at the scene provided chilling clues to the post-crime routine. A bloody pan of water was found in the kitchen, indicating the attacker washed their hands before leaving. Beside it sat a heavy slab of bacon wrapped in a cloth. A kerosene lamp rested on the floor, its chimney removed, suggesting it was used to cast a directed light. The ultimate consequence of this methodical violence was the total annihilation of the Moore family. Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with their 4 young children, were entirely wiped out in a single night. 2 young girls invited over for a sleepover were also caught in the devastation. 8 lives were extinguished, leaving an emotional void the town could never fill. The destruction of the Moore household cemented the event as a permanent historical scar. Because the investigation was fatally flawed from the start, no one was ever successfully convicted. The case became a notoriously unsolved mystery, frustrating generations of researchers. It stands today as a dark turning point in rural American history, where justice was outpaced by the unknown. The brutal loss of Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with the children, sent a shockwave of profound grief through the community. Funerals for the victims drew thousands of mourners who stood in stunned silence. The sheer scale of the tragedy shattered the illusion of safety that defined small-town life in 1912 Iowa. People realized that no one was truly secure. This paralyzing fear quickly mutated into intense suspicion, tearing the tight-knit fabric of the community apart. Residents began locking their doors for the first time, buying firearms and keeping watch over their homes. Whispers turned neighbors into suspects. The psychological toll on the surviving relatives was immeasurable, leaving them to navigate a world that suddenly felt unpredictable and deeply hostile. As the initial shock settled, the focus of the town shifted from mourning to demanding immediate answers. Local authorities, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the crime, scrambled to follow up on countless rumors. Detectives arrived from across the Midwest, promising to bring the killer to justice. Yet the chaos of the crime scene had already compromised the most vital clues. This desperate search for a culprit forced every family in the region to re-examine their daily routines. Simple acts like walking home after dark were now viewed through a lens of extreme caution. Local newspapers fueled this anxiety with sensationalized updates. The pressure to find the person responsible grew, creating an atmosphere where panic dictated public behavior more than rational investigation. The physical landscape of the town transformed in the weeks following the murders. Hardware stores completely sold out of new locks, bolts, and window latches within days. Streets that used to bustle with evening gatherings were completely deserted by sundown, leaving only the dim glow of street lamps. The distant whistle of a night train became a sound that triggered immediate dread. Inside the homes, the nightly routine for a typical family drastically changed. Parents nailed their windows shut despite the sweltering summer heat, choosing suffocating safety over the risk of an open breeze. Men slept with loaded shotguns resting against their nightstands. The physical space of the home now felt like a fragile fortress requiring constant defense against an invisible threat. The failure to secure a conviction exposed massive systemic flaws in early 20th century law enforcement. Without standardized crime scene protocols or centralized databases, rural police departments were unequipped to handle complex homicides. This disaster served as a brutal catalyst for modernizing criminal investigations. It highlighted the absolute necessity of preserving physical evidence and relying on scientific analysis rather than gossip. Over the following decades, the lessons learned from this botched investigation contributed to the development of professional forensics and modern standards. The realization that a killer could simply walk away from a massacre forced a complete rethinking of jurisdictional cooperation. State bureaus of investigation were eventually formed to bridge the gap between isolated sheriffs and national resources, forever altering crime scene management. For the descendants of the victims and the surviving residents, the human aftermath was a quiet, enduring burden. Generations of local families grew up carrying the weight of a horrific story that defined their hometown. Legal files and faded suspect photographs were archived and debated by historians, but they offered no genuine closure to those who inherited the grief. The procedural reality of an unsolved case means the historical mystery technically remains open. Modern experts occasionally revisit the century-old records, applying contemporary behavioral analysis to the documented suspect testimonies. Yet, without pristine physical evidence to test against modern DNA databases, these efforts yield only educated theories. The town is left to manage an identity tethered to one violent night. Today, the small white house still sits quietly on a residential street, its wooden walls holding the silence of more than a century. The heavy slab of bacon and the shattered lamp are long gone, but the heavy atmosphere of unanswered questions remains. The legacy of the Villisca axe murders is a haunting reminder of the darkness that can slip away unseen. Subscribe for a new story every week.